It might be strange to remember now, but there was a time when the summer box office wasn't dominated by comic book movies. How far back can you trace the origins of our current superheroic movie landscape? It just might start in the year 2000, when X-Men changed everything. Looking at the opening sequence of a film like 1997's Batman and Robin, it's the hero who's immediately set up as the main character. In this case, it's both Batman and Robin.
Chicks dig the car. This is why Superman works alone.
Everything about it is cheesy and over the top, and then X-Men came along and did something completely different. The film opens in a Nazi concentration camp in 1944 with a boy who, separated from his parents, makes a desperate attempt to reopen the camp's metal gates with his superhuman powers. The boy is a young Eric Lenscher, who would go on to become the film's primary antagonist, Magneto. But we don't see him as a villain, at least not at first. We see him as a child subjected to unimaginable horror. When it is revealed that the child has grown into the villain, it's as a sympathetic one. Fast forward to the present, and it's clear that the trend of creating sympathetic villains hasn't gone away. X-Men played a huge role in introducing the idea of a villainous monster you could actually care about. This also blurred the line between good and evil. While Professor X advocates for peace, Magneto is convinced the only outcome is war. But ultimately, they both want the same thing: for mutant kind to be raised up from oppression. In his review of the film, Roger Ebert said, "X-Men is at least not a manic editing frenzy for atrophied attention spans. It's restrained and introspective for a superhero epic." In fact, much of X-Men's hour and 44-minute runtime is spent on character development, introducing audiences to the main players, explaining their special abilities, and delving into their personal struggles against bigotry and discrimination. Fight scenes and action sequences are there, but they're not the main focus of the film.
So read my mind.
I'd rather not.
Come on. You afraid you might like it?
It might have something to do with the fact that director Bryan Singer had never read the comics as a kid. Singer told the Los Angeles Times in 2016 that it wasn't until he started watching the animated series later on in life that he began to form an attachment to the characters. He explained, "When I suddenly come across this universe that's all about misfits and outcasts who become superheroes, it intrigued me. I started to figure a way to tell this story not just to the fan base, but to a wider audience." The focus of the film became a social message as opposed to the big stuff audiences had come to expect from action blockbusters. Magneto wasn't the only X-Men character to get his on-screen introduction via a relatable human backstory. In Mississippi, we see 17-year-old Marie accidentally put her boyfriend into a coma after she kisses him for the first time. Regardless of the continuity between her portrayal in the original comics and in the 2000 film, Marie, later Rogue, wasn't introduced as a fully fledged misfit superhero. She was our point of view character, a regular person with not-so-regular problems. Bryan Singer told the Los Angeles Times that he treated the characters in X-Men with, quote, "the same seriousness as those in The Usual Suspects." That legitimacy was crucial to making a satisfying movie, he explained, saying, "You can't just take a bunch of characters and throw them together and stir them up in a soup and hope that it works." From the beginning, X-Men worked to set itself apart from its comic movie predecessors via its tone and approach to storytelling. Bryan Singer went into the movie from a standpoint of really wanting it to be a serious film set in a fantastic world, but he was also keenly aware of how audiences would feel going into a so-called comic movie. In an interview with MTV News, Hugh Jackman, who played Wolverine throughout the franchise, said that Singer was so dedicated to making X-Men stand out as more than just a comic film that he wouldn't even allow comic books onto the set, thereby effectively making source material contraband.
Hey, where are all my comic books?
Oh, those dreadful things. I gave those away.
Jackman went on to explain,
he really wanted to take comic book characters seriously as real three-dimensional characters, and he said people who don't understand these comics might think they're two-dimensional.
The three biggest films of the 2000 summer box office were headlined by Tom Cruise, Russell Crowe, and George Clooney, respectively. At that point in time, all three had proven themselves as leading men. X-Men stars were a couple of actors who were in their 60s, a pre-Gandalf Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, then best known for telling Wesley Crusher to shut up in Star Trek TNG.
But shut up, Wesley!
The two leads were supported by a mostly unknown cast who had done some TV work and a teen horror flick here and there. Halle Berry had done some high-profile movie work, but she wouldn't go on to win her Oscar for Monsters Ball or become a box office force of her own for a couple more years. Speaking with MTV News, Hugh Jackman said he went into the audition as if it weren't a real one because he thought Dougray Scott was already going to play the role of Wolverine.
I think I was sent up there just to kind of send a message back to Mission Impossible 2, like, you better hurry up because we're going to start looking at other people.
Right.
I didn't think it was a real audition.
What X-Men proved, however, is that you didn't need a big star to sell a film to audiences. Endgame marked a high for Marvel Studios and for the comic film genre, but chances are it wouldn't exist had X-Men not first paved the way. In 1996, Marvel filed for bankruptcy and sold off the cinematic rights to several of its properties in an effort to stay afloat. 20th Century Fox picked up the rights to the X-Men, and although the movie was a success at the box office, Marvel wound up with zero to show for it. 2 years later, the same would happen with Sony's Spider-Man, and again, Marvel would walk away with nothing. In 2005, after X-Men and Spider-Man had proven how successful a comic film could be if done properly, Marvel gambled everything they had to launch their own production studio, with Iron Man ushering in the Marvel Cinematic Universe 3 years later. Love it or hate it, X-Men was built to begin a franchise, and it made major use of a cliffhanger after the film's storyline was wrapped up. It's a common thing now, but back then, films didn't typically rely on such gimmicks. The ending of the film sees Professor X visits Magneto in his plastic cell, where Magneto shares his plan to continue his fight. It's obvious this isn't the real end of the story and that there's a definitive plan for more. And now we watch comic films and actually expect a tease for more.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
By the time X-Men arrived in theaters, it had been over a decade since Tim Burton's first Batman movie had set the box office on fire. In the time since, superhero movies had hardly been shown to be a guaranteed path to blockbuster success. Even Batman sequels had turned into a game of diminishing returns.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
2000's X-Men proved two things. The first is that comic book adaptations didn't have to be campy. It also proved that comic films could be profitable. Longtime X-Men comics writer Chris Claremont told Polygon in 2019, "Up until then, everybody had looked on superhero films as losers. Then the X-Men rolled in with a 9-figure opening weekend, which nobody saw coming. 20 years later, we are in the world of today with Black Panther pulling in 3 Oscars and Into the Spider-Verse getting Best Animated Film." Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite superhero movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.